Hi there, and welcome to the Mind Circus podcast. Today, our guest is Michelle Crandall of Pets in Focus Photography. You're going to love her story. She's going to talk about a lot today. She talks about how COVID changed the future of her business. She is a retired psych nurse. She's going to talk about how that shaped her as a photographer and entrepreneur. And you're going to hear about her mantra, do it scared, and how that plunged her forward into the next chapter of her business. So, pull up a seat and let the circus begin.
Welcome to the Mind Circus podcast, where we uncover the topsy-turvy thoughts of those we call creatives. The Mind Circus can be entertaining and daunting, but we need to uncover ways to be the ringmaster of our own mind circus. If you want to hear real stories from creatives who've plunged into the black abyss of the mind circus and managed to become the ringmaster, then join our host, Karen Bartos, a photographer, entrepreneur, and creative ringleader, as she'll ask direct questions to help listeners understand and be inspired to master their own mind circus and reach new levels of success. So find a seat and let's be part of the circus. Now here's your host, Karen Bartos.
Hey, Michelle, I want to thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast.
Hi, Karen. I'm so excited. Thank you.
I am
Mind Circus is such a perfect name.
Oh, gosh, I love it. And I don't even, that just popped into my head when I was on a recent podcast. And I'm like, gosh, darn it, I have to do something with this because as an entrepreneur, we can learn Photoshop skills, we can learn Lightroom, we can learn how to use our camera, but the mind it's ongoing. So, and sometimes the circus is raging and sometimes it's a little calmer. Yeah. So I just want to get straight to business and talk to you, Michelle, and tell us a little bit about you, where you're located, what you do, what that type of thing.
Sure. Well, my name is Michelle Crandall. I'm a pet photographer in Michigan. I serve pet parents anywhere from Ann Arbor to Toledo, Ohio. I'm right smack dab in the middle. I started my business in 2019. Of course, hindsight would tell you that probably wasn't the best idea. Started out in dog sports, and in 2020, all the events were canceled.
Right.
So I had to pivot into dog portraits instead of dog sports, and I've been building that business ever since.
Wow. So you started in 2019 and we shut down in what, 2020?
It was March of 2020. The very first day we went into lockdown, I actually had a birthday party, a doggy birthday party scheduled. And I had to say, no, I couldn't go, because back then, everybody was still like wondering if it's real, do we really need all this? And
yeah,
obviously we did, but so the very first day that we were in lockdown, I had something scheduled. And so I went on throughout the year. I had 25 events that were canceled.
Wow.
So my whole year was totally wiped out.
Okay, well, let's talk about the mind circus there. Like, what were you thinking? 25 events, that's huge. Canceled, poof, gone.
Totally gone. Yeah. I was so excited to start my business and to launch this. I did a local program called Launch Lenaway. It was like a small business kind of boot camp in training. My history before photography is I was a registered nurse for 17 years. So I had no business training whatsoever. I just thought I'd get my LLC, and if you build it, they will come. And that did not happen. Yeah. So I did my business course, which was immensely helpful, and set out to start my business and to just start in the world. I am a pet photographer. Here I am. Please come to me. And that didn't work. It never works.
Yeah.
So I got this great idea because I loved doing agility with my own dogs. And it was something that I really enjoyed, but they were older, so they couldn't do it anymore. And I connected with a local trainer and I said, hey, can I just come in while you guys are in class just to practice, just to see if I can do it? And, a couple of weeks later, I was the photographer at an event. And it turned out great, Karen. I think I sold over $1,000 worth of photos.
Wow.
And they were terrible, terrible photos. I mean, it was my very first event. My ISO was like 25,000 in this indoor arena. It was terrible, but people loved it because a lot of times there's only photographers at like the big competitions or like the national type events.
Right.
So it was really cool for me to be there because, you know, the average person that doesn't go on to nationals may not have the opportunity to get photos that much. So I was really on board. This was my first event. I did so great. I was like, I'm going to book everything that I can book for 2020. And I did that because people liked me and it worked really well. I would like reset the jumps. I was part of the whole scene,
That's great.
and then it just was totally wiped out. And you want to talk about the mind circus that goes
Yes.
on. I was like, what is happening? I mean, even on a spiritual level, I was like, everything is like planned out in my whole year and I was ready to go. And
Yeah.
why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Like God placed COVID on us, that's that didn't happen. But I was like, why would you do this to me? Shaking my fist at the sky. So
Yeah.
there was so much mess.
Oh my gosh. So then how did you get through it? I mean, you obviously came through on the other side of it. What?
I yeah, I coming through that was really difficult because I am the type of person that Heather will tell you this. I make a plan, I take a bunch of check boxes, and I start checking them off. So I had my plan, I had all my check boxes for dog sports photography, and then I couldn't check anything off.
Right.
And I kind of didn't know what to do. So that is when I took a more like a heavier interest into like the coaching programs. I started with the Hair of the Dog Academy and Nicole Begley. I had started it in 2018, but it was just to learn the basics, like you were talking about, Photoshop and Lightroom. I did that stuff. I started my business legally. I had contracts and I had all the basics done. So then I took the year and said, okay, I'm going to work on my craft and really making sure that my business is ready for when this is over.
Over. Right.
So I did spend a lot of money on education in 2020. I did a lot of courses
Because there was nothing else to do.
because there was nothing else to do. True. And then I started to see it was really interesting when you talk about mindset, because what I started to see was opportunities that photographers were creating for themselves, such as doing like porch portraits.
Oh, right.
And so they would go to somebody's house and take a picture of the family on the porch. And then I saw the backlash from that because legally, at that time, legally, we were all supposed to be, safe at home, and we weren't supposed to be out, and we weren't supposed to be interacting. And so it was like this gray line. And I was really afraid to make a mistake and to tick people off, because then I don't want my business to be seen, my brand new fleggling business, to be seen as like that person who tried to get everybody sick with COVID. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did nothing. There was inaction. There was action on the education, sitting in front of my computer and getting into that whole thing. But I think when you talk about in hindsight, if I would have done anything else, I would have been out taking pictures of my own dogs, taking pictures and just, getting comfortable behind the camera instead of getting comfortable behind the computer.
Well, and that was just such a strange time in terms of, and I remember even in my business, hair and makeup artists weren't supposed to be working. And,
Right.
I was doing some shoots when things opened back up, but
Yeah.
it was still the same thing. It was, well, don't tag me in any of these pictures because, in the industry, we're not supposed to be working. And it
Right.
was just a strange time in terms of people were so judgmental.
They were.
So I
It
can,
was a very polarizing time
yes.
in general, in the
Well,
world. Yeah.
yeah. So I can completely understand not wanting to, upset somebody by, taking porch pictures. But the
Yeah.
fact that you even persevered and didn't say, okay, screw it, I'm not even going to do this photography thing. Like,
Right.
what made you stick with it? Because you obviously did. There had to have been something.
What made me stick with it, and this is going way out of the photography realm, was seeing, because Lord knows I sure as heck could have gotten a job as an RN during
Yes.
COVID.
Right.
Watching the RNs that were working and seeing what they were going through
Mm-hmm.
reminded me why I got out of nursing.
Why you left it. Yes. Yeah.
Because there's definitely something to be said for loving your job and working from home. And if I want to take my dog for a walk, I can at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There's also something to be said for not sobbing to the point that you have to pull off the road on your way home from work every day.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's what I was experiencing as an RN. It was overwhelming, felt totally trapped. And, I certainly don't speak for any other nurse except for myself, but I know there were other nurses that were feeling that way, overwhelmingly so during COVID.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So I did persevere in my photography business because I knew that I did not want to go back there.
Exactly. So you had that very compelling why of
Yes.
why you were going to stick it out. Yeah. Some of my clients were nurses and they said working through COVID changed them forever.
Yeah. At their core. Absolutely.
Yes. So yeah. So you had a very strong why for why you stuck through it. You knew the alternative and you didn't want to go back.
Yeah.
So you stuck with it, and then you made the transition to pet portraits. Did competing in events completely go by the wayside, and you focused solely on portraits? How did that look coming out of the lockdown?
Yeah. Coming out of the lockdown was super messy because in Michigan, where I live, at least, there was a long period of time, I would say into like June of 2021, where they would still restrict the amount of people that were allowed to be inside. And so when you're looking at, for example, a dog sports event, you've got the timers and you've got the recorders and you've got the leash runners and you've got the person running. There's already at least 10 people that are needed for the core event to be in that building. And the photographer is not one of them.
Yep. Right.
So I thought, in the beginning of 2020, I said, well, I can get through this, a couple weeks. Then it turned into a couple months. Then I said, well, by 2021, we'll be good. And it just did not come out. Like it was still going on and on. So I said, all right, it's time for me to pivot. Because the interesting thing, the reason that I chose dog sports was because I really do love it. Also, I don't think that I'm very good talking to humans.
Which is so funny. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but go
Sure.
ahead.
I'm sure that that'll be a topic in the future. I don't, I was very, very afraid to do dog portraits because I would have to interact with the dog parents so much. So in dog sports, I sit in the corner. Half the people don't even know I'm there.
I mean, you just do your thing.
They get a link and they're like, wow, I love this picture and I'll buy it. I never have to talk to them. But dog portraits, the families, sometimes they want to be in the photos and then I've got to like deal with posing them and I don't know how to pose humans. And so it was really a very big deal for me to make the decision to go to do portraits.
Yes. Oh my gosh. But what I love about how you made that transition too is action pictures are a whole genre in itself. I mean,
Absolutely.
you've got to have your settings just right. You've got to nail that focus. And then portraits are a completely different game as well, because you're interacting with people, you're asking dogs to sit still. You're more worried about the composition when it comes to portraits. So
you got to slow down.
Yeah, the fact that you tackled both is just, I think that's really amazing. I used to, when I photographed seniors and a senior would ask me to, we had to do some action shots of their sports. It would be like, really? Like, this is not my forte. So the fact that you have both mastered, I think is just great.
Yeah, it has helped me a lot in the portraits because now people love the running dog shots, which, I can do that.
Okay. See how that prepared you for portraits. Wow.
Yes.
So how do you get past your fear of talking to people, and how do you do that today?
I did a lot of coaching work with, I think she's been on your podcast previously, with Heather through the Flourish Academy. I did work with her because, like I said earlier, I've checked all the boxes, right? Got my LLC, I know how to use Photoshop and Lightroom, and I've got my camera and I've figured out the settings. Why aren't people coming? I put my offer out there and nobody knows who I am and nobody knows what I'm doing. So then my mind says, they hate me, I'm terrible. Everything that I'm doing is stupid.
It was all
That's
about you.
That's all about me. Doesn't have anything to do with the fact that nobody had any money or
Yeah.
we weren't allowed to talk to each other or anything. It didn't have anything to do with anybody else. It was all, I am terrible. That's why my business isn't working. Once I worked with Heather and sorted some of that out, my mantra in 2023 became do it scared.
Okay.
Because I thought that with enough coaching and with enough education, I wouldn't be afraid. And the truth is, Karen, I will always be afraid. And I just have to push through that. And I don't mean that the fear is always going to be at 100% like it was the first couple of times I did it. It's lessening every time I do it.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you. Does it get easier?
It does get easier, but I don't think it's a realistic expectation to go out and think that this is just going to be super easy breezy and I'm never going to be afraid, because there's all, I mean, I think that might just be my personality, and that's okay to be a little nervous going into it. And the
Oh,
nerves don't come from, how do I say, they don't come from being nervous about, how do I say this?
were you nervous about your ability? Were you nervous? Like, what made you nervous? Just talking to people.
I was nervous for their judgment.
Okay, you were nervous they were going to judge the pictures of their pet.
I was nervous that they were going to judge me for being a pet photographer and not a regular, in quotations, photographer.
Wow. Okay, that's huge.
Yeah,
I'm surrounded by a lot of you pet photographers, and you guys
sure.
make it look so easy. It almost makes me want to be a pet photographer
Yeah.
because I mean, you make it look so easy. And so that was your big hang up, is that people are going to think you're not a real photographer.
I thought that they were going to judge me for not being a jack of all trades photographer. There are photographers out there that do everything. They do headshots and newborns and weddings and seniors and pets and whatever you want, they can help you out with. And there's definite value to photographers like that. I am not that photographer. In the beginning, I was ashamed to not be that photographer
Wow. Okay.
because I am a person who, it's me and my husband,
Mhm.
and we don't have children,
Mhm.
and my dogs are my life. And I've been judged for that previously. So now on top of it, I'm going to take pictures of only pets. So the judgment is just going to get worse.
Okay. Well, I
That's
wonder
what I
if,
thought.
could you have flipped that looking back
Yeah.
to say, because I was the same way when I started out. I shot weddings, babies, families. I
Yeah.
did not ever photograph pets. But when I found my sweet spot, it was like, I'm actually going to be proud of my ability to pick one genre and do it really, really well.
Yes.
So, what do you think prevented you from being able to flip that fear to saying, I'm going to be proud of this?
Oh,
Was
it was a total scarcity mindset.
okay.
Like we talked about right before this call. Totally. I was afraid. I was afraid because from 2019 to like 2021, I was not flourishing at all in my business. I don't think many photographers were
Right.
flourishing during that time. But I have quit my job as an RN. I have started this business and I have nothing to show for it, is what
Okay.
I thought. The truth of the matter, we both know I had plenty to show for it. All of this education and building this baseline and talking to people in the community. But to me, all I saw was the dollar sign at the end of the spreadsheet. And that dollar sign was not very much. And that's the only thing that I was judging my business on.
The only thing. Wow.
Yes.
Gosh. Oh my, this.
So, yeah, the scarcity mindset was a big deal with me because I thought, well, everybody else is making money doing everything. So maybe I should do that too. And who knows if they were making money or not? That's just a story that I made up in my head.
Well, and I'm shaking my head like crazy over here because when, and I'm guilty of this, when we set our goals according to what other people are doing, it's a sure equation for success or for failing, because
Yeah.
there's some, I'm a part of Boudoir Mastermind, and I see what some of these photographers are making, and I'm like, wow. So I'm going to set my goals that high. Well, when I miss the mark, guess what? But it has caused me to reevaluate my goals and say, okay, Karen, what is important to you in this time in your life that you
Right.
want to be making? What other things do you want to do in your life? But I also think there's another part of that equation. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors
Absolutely.
where
Absolutely.
people will want to make you think they're doing well when they are actually struggling. And I attribute a
Yeah.
lot of that to social media.
Oh yeah.
I've actually talked about this on other podcasts. Facebook is off my phone unless I'm doing a live video.
Mhm.
On my computer, I have news feed eradicator installed, so I can't see what everybody else is doing. So I've actually had
Yeah.
to be very intentional about just not paying attention to what other people are doing.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Karen, there are several pet photographers in my area, and there are photographers that do pets as well as pet photographers, and that's the only thing they do. And one that I had take photos of my own dogs in 2016. I love her. Her work is beautiful. I don't follow her on social media. I don't look at her website. The pet photographers in my area, I don't look at what they're doing because it automatically, in my brain anyways, causes this like, well, you're not enough because you're not doing what they're doing, and maybe they're making more money than you are, and who knows, maybe they are, maybe they're not, but there's no reason for me to put myself through all that drama, that mind circus,
Right.
when it's unnecessary.
I mean, the comparison gap is the comparison, it's huge. Like,
Yeah.
it's just, that would be one of my biggest tips to someone, no matter where they are in their journey. Don't pay it, stay in your own lane, stay in your
Stay
own
in your
lane and
lane.
do your own thing.
Yes, totally agree.
Oh
Totally
my
agree.
gosh. So let's talk about your journey as an RN. You were a
Ooh,
psych nurse, correct?
correct.
For 17 years.
Yes, I did 1 year in the medical intensive care unit. And then my husband and I moved to where we live now. And in that transition, the job that I got was with mental health. And so I thought, well, I'll try this and then I'll go back to the hospital. Because psych nursing was never something that I thought that I would want to do or like. And then it just really stuck.
Wow. And I can't imagine the stories. And so here's what I find so ironic.
Okay.
You obviously connected very well with your patients. They loved you.
They did.
You weren't afraid to talk to them.
I was not.
But now we shift to pet photography, and all of a sudden we're afraid to talk to people.
Yes.
Right?
When I was a nurse, I had knowledge and information. And this is the big part, Karen. I had a degree proving that I knew what I was doing, right? I have my RN BSN. I'm a board certified case manager. I took the tests and passed everything. In photography, I don't have that.
You don't have the credentials. Okay.
I don't have the credentials. So, how, photographers in all aspects of the world joke that everybody's a photographer now, but it is true. Everybody has a camera phone. And so, who am I for anybody else? Because I don't have those credentials. That was the big reason. And when I'm selling my business, this is a big thing that I worked through with coaching. It's separate from my identity. So those were the two things that really changed dramatically when I got out of nursing and went into my own business. Was now here I am on my own. I got a camera for Christmas, just like every other mom photographer, in quotations in the world. And now I think I'm a pet photographer. So there was so much that I had to work through after making that transition.
But have your clients ever once said to you, Where'd you go to school to get your camera degree or your photography? Have they ever questioned that?
Never. Nobody has ever questioned that except for me. Because in my brain, like this is what I'm structured as an RN. I got my degree, I passed my NCLEX, I did the work, I've got the experience. It's very clear cut, it's measurable. And it's nobody's going to question whether or not I got my degree. You know, I've got my license number. Nobody's ever going to question that. In photography, they can question that. But on the opposite side of that, I've seen beautiful work from people that are just starting out, and I've seen really kind of crappy work from master photographers.
I agree.
So
I agree. And that's where, you have to be careful we don't go down. And that can be a validation thing sometimes when you look at, I get that. But
yeah,
it's just, yeah, I find this fascinating that photographers get so hung up on these credentials and we're putting that on ourselves. So
yeah, we
nobody,
are.
since a client never came to you and said, Michelle, I want to see your certificate hanging on the wall. That
Right.
was something you placed upon yourself. It's totally
100%.
self-imposed.
Yes. Yeah. It's unnecessary drama. It doesn't need to be here. It's just a way that my mind is putting up all of these roadblocks to getting what I actually want. My brain and I do not get along, Karen.
Well, and again, I find this so fascinating because here you were in mental health for 17 years.
Oh, yeah. There's a reason a lot of people in mental health are in mental health because they're trying to figure out what's going on with their own brain and their own family.
Oh, so how would
Yeah.
you say being in the mental health industry prepared you for what you're doing now? Is there anything that you can draw upon?
Oh, there's lots that I can draw upon. I think one of the differences, like when you go out to set yourself apart from somebody else, all of the pet photographers in the world, why would anybody choose me? I can pick up on the teeniest things in humans and help make them more comfortable with the situation, which then totally makes their dog more comfortable in the situation.
Wow. Okay. So what you're saying is you can read body language really well
Yes,
from being
absolutely.
in the industry for all those years.
Yeah. There are some times that I can pick up on a vibe through an email. Like I don't even need to meet the person. There are some people that I stay very clear from because I see what kind of vibe they're sending through their marketing and through their media. And I just don't want to be any part of it. And so I
Right.
think that helps my clients because I go to the session and I'm just like I am here in this podcast. I'm very open, I'm very transparent. Let's do this. It's going to be fun. Your dog's not going to sit and that's okay. We'll just do what and we'll see what happens. And I've never had anybody come back and say, "Oh, those photos were terrible." Everybody always loves all their photos. They always want to buy all of them.
Yeah.
So it works so much better once people take a breath and they realize that I'm not judging them. I'm not judging their dog and their dog's behavior and all of that. This is just normal. Once
Right.
they understand that's the vibe that we're going for, everything else is easy.
Wow. And we have two dogs and I would be thinking the same thing. Like you're going to judge me because my dog can't behave.
Nobody's dog behaves. Don't worry. That's what I tell all of my clients. Everybody's dog acts crazy because this is a totally new situation.
So is that what probably one of your clients' biggest objectives is my dog can never do this?
Oh, yeah, 100%. As soon as somebody sees any photo I take, they're like, "Oh, my dog could never sit like that." And I said, "That dog was on a leash and he was just about to get ready to stand up and lick my camera." So, yes, your dog can. So, yeah, that's how I use my psych nursing background to kind of leverage what I'm doing now because I do in the portraits have so much more interaction with the humans. And I say, like, "Oh, I don't like humans," but I'm actually really good at talking to people.
Yes, apparently.
Yeah.
So it's so funny because you say you don't like humans, but okay, so do you necessarily have to like them in order to interact with them on that level?
definitely not. No, there have been tons of people. I mean, there's tons of people in everybody's lives that you have to interact with, that
Right.
you know, you might not go out to dinner with them twice a week and be super friends, but I have a great service that they love, and I'm happy to help them out with that.
Right. And I
Yeah,
guess we should say for people listening, it's not like we don't like people. It's just when you're running a business, there can be a client that might rub you the wrong way or say
sure.
something that kind of sets you off a little bit, and you just learn to deal with
Yeah.
that.
Well, you have to learn to stop telling stories around whatever it was that they said.
Oh, okay. So do you have a good example?
I had a client one time who did not like her photo at all because her dog looked awkward in it. And it was a photo that involved someone else, it was a Santa type photo.
Right.
And so the dog was nervous and scared. And here's this guy in this huge red suit, so the Santa had his collar pulled really tight. And
Oh,
so it was, one of my very first years doing photography, and I didn't really notice it was going on at the time. So she came, she looked at her gallery, she downloaded her images, and then she said she didn't like it. And so,
after she
so
downloaded them.
after she downloaded it all. And so I'm thinking, why did you download it if you didn't like it? And you want to talk about the mind circus that was going on in my head at this point, because I was like, I had done so much education at this point, Karen. I was like, is this woman trying to steal photos from me? What is she doing? Why did she download them if she doesn't like them? Is she trying to get free stuff? And on and on and on and on and on. And the truth of the matter is, her dog just looked like he wasn't happy because he
Yeah.
wasn't happy.
Right. Right. What you were trying to make it bigger than.
Right. And so what ended up happening was I made it right. I went again to the whole setup, did the photo. I told the Santa, do not touch this dog's collar, give him a hug, because and another thing that I have learned now is when a dog is uncomfortable, it's not worth the $10 or the $25 or the $100 or whatever you're going to make off of that photo. Just abort the session,
Oh, okay.
because that dog was afraid.
Yes.
And the reason that this is the first example that comes up into my mind is not because of like whatever, however much it was, $25 or something like that, that I lost out on. It was that I didn't make the human made the dog do it. You know what I mean? But I put that dog in the situation to be afraid. And that's the last thing that I want to do.
Okay. So that's the lesson you learned is like you said, if the dog is uncomfortable,
We're done.
we're done.
Yeah.
Wow. Have you ever had to do that with a full paying client, not a Santa session?
Not yet.
No, don't say it
Not
that
yet.
way. No.
I haven't. Well, I try, because I'm very good at human behavior.
Right.
I'm pretty good at dog behavior too, but there are still some, I'm not a dog trainer. I
Right.
haven't spent years and years looking into dog behavior, but I have done a lot of education on dog behavior. So when somebody else sees a cute dog with their tongue hanging out, smiling in quotations, I can now pick up on the difference between that and a dog who's terrified. And that's why they're anxious, their tongue's hanging out because they're like breathing heavy.
Wow. Okay. So you're
Yeah,
learning to read dog language
as well.
because you
Yeah.
obviously can read human language.
Yeah. Well, but to then go back to a client and tell them we're done here is difficult. So you have to have really good human skills to tell them. So now it's become a thing where I tell them right off the bat, listen, we're going to do this. We're going to start out with the longest lens and see how the dog does. If the dog is afraid of the longest lens, they're sure as heck going to be afraid of the tiny lens that I use. So we're not, because then I have to be so much closer to them.
Closer. Right.
So this is how the session starts, and this is why. And so I found that once I explain that process to them, they're also looking at their dog through that lens instead of, I've got to sit, I've got to make my dog sit, I've got to sit to get this photo. We've taken all of the pressure off of it.
So a little bit of client education is very important to you.
Yes. In the beginning, I thought it was just throw the dog in front of your camera and take the picture and move on, because I was doing so many mini sessions trying to get my name out there.
Right.
now my mini sessions are structured so much differently. And it's because of the experiences that I had in the beginning. And this was just one dog that this happened to out of probably 50 dogs that I photographed that year and in that scenario. But I still regret putting that dog in that position, even today.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, we all have regrets of things we would have done differently. But
Mhm.
you rather than staying stuck in that experience, you learned from it. Again, you flipped it and you learned
Yeah.
something
Mhm.
that's now going to make your client process even better.
Yeah. And the dogs that I photograph now are much more comfortable because so many, so many times in these mini sessions, clients will come in and they've got their dog like on a short, tight leash and they're like, get up there and sit, 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 sit. And I said, stop telling the dog to sit. Let them sniff around. We've got 15, 20 minutes, let them sniff around because this is going to make them so much more comfortable. And the people look at me questioning, like, that's okay. And I said, yes, it's okay. Not only is it okay, it's mandatory. I need
Mandatory.
this dog to sniff around, figure out where they're at. Hopefully, they're not going to pee on something, but if they do, I'm not judging. And then we'll do the session. So, yeah.
And I'm sure with your energy and you just put people so much at ease. I mean, just the energy you give off in our group Elevate.
Yeah.
I know, and just even talking to you, you exude such an energy that just makes me feel relaxed talking to you. And
That's wonderful.
I'm sure that carries over into your clients. And I have no doubt that your patients loved you.
Yeah.
Want to shift a little bit and talk about something we were chatting about before we started recording, and
Oh,
that
yeah.
is in Elevate, you have been named the people's coach.
That is me. Capital T, capital P, capital H, the people's coach.
I love it. And so, how is that? I know Heather, our friend Heather Halatonen, who started the Flourish Academy
Yes.
and now has Elevate, has even called upon you, Michelle Crandall, to coach her through some things, which is like
Yeah,
a very high accolade.
it is. Yes.
And you've had some people, me included, telling you you really need to be a coach, Michelle.
Yes.
So, we're not saying any decisions are going to be made on this podcast today. However,
Got
I'd
it.
love to talk to you about what's your mind circus around that?
Yeah. Karen, there's a lot of mind circus around that. Uh, which is funny because as we were talking about just before this call, I am well versed. This is what I've spent 17 years training for. I'm not a social worker. I don't have any counseling degrees or anything like that. But you can't help but pick up a bunch of stuff when you're working 17 years as a psych nurse. So this is funny to me. It's not funny. It's interesting that it would be like the photography that I love so much and the nursing that I miss so much. I can put them together and be a coach.
They collide.
They collide in coaching. Karen, I need you to know that in 2018, I laughed at the thought of a life coach. That's ridiculous.
Really.
That's who needs a life coach? Nobody needs a life coach. This is crazy. Who's paying for that? Okay, well, I paid for it in 2022.
Right, right. As did I, as I do continue. Yes.
Right. I mean, it's business coaching for sure, but that was one of the funny things that I talked to in Elevate and I talked to Heather about is it's not really, you can't separate the two because you don't want to, Michelle Crandall is not Pets in Focus, but Michelle Crandall's brain certainly deals with Pets in Focus.
Focus. Right.
So you have to get your mindset straight, which is, I guess, probably mostly life coaching stuff to get the business coaching on board. And I think that's what so many people don't understand is that it doesn't matter what your price list is. It really doesn't. Half
Right.
the time, it doesn't even matter what your pictures look like. If the people are not buying that, they're buying you. And so if you don't have your mind straight, that's setting off a vibe and they're picking
Right.
it up.
Right.
So if I can help people with that through coaching to bring this back around, I would love to do that. But again, there's no degree, Karen, that I can put up on my wall.
But yes, there is 17 years in a psych ward. That's a heck of a degree for me. And you've built your
Yeah.
own business during a pandemic and you stuck with it. You stuck with it. Well, I mean, your why was strong enough. And
Yeah.
just from talking to you, you just have a gift and a knack to just put people at ease and
Thank you.
no judgment. And I'm going to be one of your biggest cheerleaders rooting for you for this because I think it comes very naturally to you and very effortless. It just almost seems to be at the core of who you are is helping people. So
Yeah. I mean, it started out young for sure.
yeah. So, and I'd love
Yeah.
to, I love your story that you shared with me before we started recording about how one reason you left nursing was
Mhm.
because you would go in and help a client or help a patient.
Yes.
Tell us what that looked like.
Well, I would go in. It's the same reason the only job I've ever been fired from was as a waitress. Okay. And the reason that I was fired as a waitress was the same reason that I struggled in nursing. I was an excellent nurse. Okay. Like I got all the Daisy Awards and, I always got high marks and high regards on my evaluations. What people didn't like about me was that I would take extra time with the clients. And so, if the story that I shared was here I am administering medications to this woman who has a newly diagnosed bipolar disorder. She's scared out of her mind. Her family is super mad at her because she's been unmanaged in a manic state. She's buying cars and everything else. And they're super upset with her because of all of the destruction that a manic phase can leave a trail of destruction for
Wow.
sure. So she's crying and she's very upset. And I sat down with her and talked through it. And she's sobbing and, like, I'm trying to help her through this. This is a manageable condition. It's going to be a struggle, but you're strong enough to get through it. And, saying all the right things and the things that I believe because I've seen other people do them. And then I get written up because my meds were 15 minutes late to the next client.
Oh my gosh.
And so I look at things, I think at the core of my being, I look at things on a more holistic level than many people do.
Yes.
And definitely supervisors do not look at it in this holistic sense of the word. So, medicine, the medical industry, it's a business. And I don't think many nurses went into nursing for the business aspect of it. They went in it because they want to help people.
I want to help people. Yes.
That's what nurses do. So when those two things are at odds, helping the people but making the money and making sure your whiteboard is up to date every morning, and you're some person is getting ready to crash, but you don't have your name written on the board, so they don't know who you are, but they know that you can help them out with their CPR. It's Heather would have called it a values conflict.
Yes. It took the personalization out of nursing.
Yeah.
And
that's still happening every day in the medical industry. Absolutely. Just because I'm not there doesn't mean it's not happening. And it's just, it's a values conflict, Karen.
Yeah. I mean, I 100%. And I think what you have to offer, the coaching world needs to hear. And I think that's when someone says that to you, like you have a service, you have a story, because your story translates over into how you care for, how you cared for your patients, but also how you might care for coaching clients.
Yeah.
Your experience and your story is needed. And I think that that's really important to consider as this is something you think about moving forward. Again, I'm your biggest cheerleader when it comes to this. And I know you have a lot of people in Elevate who are cheering you on as well.
Elevate is a
And
wonderful group. Yes.
it is. And I'm
Yeah.
sure the Mind Circus will be raging.
Yeah.
If this is something you hopefully decide to go forward with. But I think you would make a fantastic coach. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I will.
Something that you said right before we hit record was it doesn't have to be either or, it can be both and. What the thing that I'm currently struggling with is, do I have to stop being a pet photographer to become a coach? And that isn't true.
No, in fact, I think it makes you even that more relatable.
I think you're right.
You
That's one
know,
of the reasons that I became the people's coach in Elevate, because there's so much value in these high level photographers that are part of the group, and they're more than willing to share all of the knowledge that they have. But there's also value in somebody being in the trenches right next to you. And I am that person right now in the trenches.
yes, you are the boots on the ground. I think, a
Yeah.
lot of photographers who, step away from photographing, they lose that sense of what you and I struggle with.
Yes.
And, I think it makes you that much more relatable.
Well,
So
thank
I'm
you.
super excited to see what comes next for you. Because no, it doesn't have to. Heather's constantly telling me it doesn't have to be either or. It can be both and.
Yes.
So,
She's told me that too, Karen. Doesn't mean I listened.
I know. When will we listen?
I don't know.
So I want to ask you, as we begin to wrap up, what advice would you give the Michelle of 8 years ago?
Oh, that's a good one. What advice? Okay. The advice that I would tell myself 8 years ago is that you don't have to stay in a job where you're super unhappy.
Okay. Wow.
You don't have to stay there. You don't have to cry on your way home. You don't have to get abused. I mean, there were situations where I was hit by
I
patients.
can't
I
imagine.
was in a situation where there were guns involved, and you don't have to put yourself in that situation, because the truth is, I felt at that time that it was me doing my job, and for my employer, I was doing such a good job. But the truth is, when this all went down and I left my employer, they didn't care.
Wow.
They posted the job posting on Monday after I left and moved on with their life. And I was so hurt by that, Karen.
Yeah.
I had put so much of my life into that place, and they could care less.
Just validates you did the right thing.
Oh, absolutely. So that's what I would tell my previous self is you're working so hard for somebody that doesn't care that you're working so hard.
Had you thought about leaving prior to that? Was it something you wrestled with for a long time, or was it just one day you woke up and said, I've had enough?
I woke up and actually, full transparency, I had become very, very depressed. And
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I'm going through the motions and I'm trying to do this, and I just cannot continue this, because it was like I was going to work and acting instead of being truthful. And for me, being truthful and being transparent and honesty is the top, one of my top values, right?
Core value. So it was in conflict there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a huge conflict, and it was causing me to then become very depressed, because I felt like I was in this box and I couldn't do anything about it. So at the end, I just took a leave of absence and never went back,
Wow.
because it was so it was such a toxic environment. I cannot say that with enough emphasis. It was such a toxic environment, and I don't even know that they recognized how toxic it was.
Well, and which is so ironic because here you are trying to help people heal mentally, and you're not even taking care of your boots on the ground people.
Absolutely not. Yeah. And at that time, it was, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. At that time, it wasn't as talked about now. Like, employees, through COVID, we did learn a whole lot about how employees are, and what motivates them. So I'm not excusing what happened. Absolutely not. It was a terrible experience. 0 stars, would not go back. But I think hopefully people learned after that and through COVID that you do have to take care of your people, because if you don't, now they know they have the option to leave.
Right.
So
Right. Well, and I love, so did you was there, so your mental state kind of led you to say, I've had enough.
Yes.
Because I know there are plenty of photographers who are trying to leave a corporate job or whatever, and
Yeah.
they feel stuck. I mean, I know I was truly happy once became an entrepreneur. I liked jobs, but they maybe weren't as fulfilling.
Yeah.
Did the money factor ever enter into it? Because I'm sure you did pretty well as a nurse financially. Did it ever come into
Yeah.
your mind that, oh my gosh, I can't make this money if I quit my job? Did
Oh
that,
yeah, absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
how'd you sort through that?
Well, during COVID, I am very, the truth of the matter is, I am very blessed to have a second income in my household
Right.
with my husband, who is wonderful. He supports me in everything I do. And after watching me go through what I did as a nurse, he said, truthfully, I don't care what you do. I just want you to be happy.
Happy.
So I am very blessed. And I realize that to have that sort of support system at home is something that most people, I would venture to say most people don't have. So in COVID, like there was, all of this unemployment drama. And then, they just kind of like spit you out. Like, okay, now it's over.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And go. And so, but the support system, and going back to the dog sports, I'm still not allowed in the building.
Right.
so so even though to you COVID in quotations is over, I'm still not allowed to work. So now what do I do? So at that point, something that you don't know is that I actually went back to nursing in a case management role.
Okay.
And that's how I supplemented.
Okay.
I worked from home, uh and did what I could, but
But I think, and here's the key to maybe someone who is struggling to leave a corporate job or an unhappy
yeah,
job,
yeah.
find some way to make it work. Like you took on that case management job to make
Mhm.
it work.
Yeah. You
You
have to
know,
find something in the meantime that makes you work, because for those of us in a corporate job that we despise, we come home and we're exhausted.
exhausted.
And so then you're not putting your best foot forward in what you really want to do, whether that's
Correct.
a photography business or a coaching business or whatever entrepreneur you are. Um, you're just exhausted. And so when you start out with 2 out of 10, no way are you putting your best foot forward. And so then it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, Karen. Like you're not getting clients and you don't know why. It's because you're exhausted, and that's the vibe you're putting out. And then you go back to work and you're more exhausted, and it's just this domino.
Yep.
So if there's a way where you can make it work, whether it's a part-time job and then you put more work into photography, or whatever, again, whatever your chosen entrepreneur style is, or whatever you want to do, you have to try to figure out a way to make it work. Because if you don't put in 100%, you're sure as heck not going to get that out.
Not gonna get it out. Yep. No,
And when you're in a corporate job you hate, you're not giving 100% in any aspect.
right. No, I really like this because I know there are a lot of photographers that would long to just leave their, corporate setting and do photography full time. So
Yeah, I
I
know.
think,
I'm good friends with a photographer actually who worked in, I think she was like a managerial role in the corporate world, and a pet photographer. And she made the leap where she went to just like a regular associate instead of a managerial role, and she went part-time. So then she had more time for her photography, but when she went back to her corporate work, it wasn't that high stress, have to do everything, because she wasn't a manager anymore.
she
So
could
she,
kind of leave it at work. She didn't have to take it home with her.
right, she can leave it at work.
Yeah. So
So
I think there's definitely possibilities out there for someone who's
yeah,
trying to look to make that leap.
I agree.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
So some of the questions I've been asking at the end of podcasts are, I'll be honest, I borrowed a couple of them from Brian Buffini, who I love,
All right.
but so kind of along the same lines of what advice would you give, Michelle? What is your favorite quote
My favorite quote.
or your favorite saying or the best piece of advice you've been given?
Yeah. You know what the best piece of advice that I've given? So I can answer your first question. My favorite quote is actually on my website. The purity of a person's heart can be quickly measured by how they regard animals.
Huh.
And I have seen that over and over and over again in my life, way before I became a pet photographer. So that's probably one of my favorite quotes because it goes back to, it's kind of like the underdog mentality, right? How do you treat others? How do you treat people that are less fortunate than you or less capable than you? Who are you when nobody's watching?
Yes, exactly.
And a
Exactly.
lot of times, because I have so many interactions with animals, I can see how people treat their animals. If they're coming up to me and their animal is afraid of them, I can tell a whole lot about that person without ever speaking to them.
Wow.
So that's one of my favorite quotes.
I love it.
What was the other question you
Oh, it
asked?
was kind of along the same lines. Just know, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
The best piece of advice I've ever been given is from Heather Lottinen. That surprises no one, I'm sure. And it's do it scared.
Do it scared. Yeah.
Last year, I used that in every aspect of my life, from my photography business to my personal life. I tried out for things that I never would have tried out for. I didn't want to do. I was literally trembling. My whole body was trembling on more than one occasion. And I did it.
You
And
did
I
it.
didn't
And
die.
you didn't die. And look, now you're the people's coach. So
Now
do it
I'm the people's
scared.
coach. I had my best year in business ever last year. I'm going to
Amen.
build on
Love
it.
it.
Do it scared.
I love that. That's great. So then what has been the most instrumental book in your entrepreneurial journey? Is there some book that you would recommend to that should be on everybody's reading list?
You know, I've been asked this question before, and the more books I read, the more it changes.
Okay.
In the Elevate group, I run a book club every month. And so I am always watching if somebody says they've got a great book. I took a name down for you even before we started. And it's not necessarily just one book, but it is spend the time to educate yourself and look at all of these different. I'm reading a book right now that it's for real estate agents, it doesn't, but the basis of it is in this book. It's called Ninja Selling, and it's
Okay.
by Kendall is the last name, and it's all about real estate, but it absolutely translates to photography too, because it's talking about selling and not being like a used car salesman type, which we can all benefit from. So this isn't a book that I normally would have read because it's for real estate agents, but it's broadening your horizons and learning, just learning. Don't become stagnant. If I had to say one book, the book is from Mel Robbins, The 5 Second Rule.
Right.
And
Yep.
the reason that it is so instrumental was not that like I'm gushing over this book and I loved every piece of it. I loved the idea of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, because I love to procrastinate and I'm scared. And so I don't want to do it. So I say to myself, okay, fine. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, call the people and just do it scared, get it over with, and move on, because you can handle whatever they're going to say,
Right.
whether it's a yes or a no.
Yeah.
Excuse me, you're going to be able to handle it.
Yeah, no, I love Mel Robbins.
So do
It's
I.
that's another podcast I consume regularly.
Yes.
So if you have an evening with your husband,
Yes.
and you want to watch something on TV, what is your go-to to turn on the TV and watch? Is it a documentary? Is
Oh,
it true crime? Is it a movie?
listen. Okay. So we really have a thing for Dateline.
Dateline.
It's true crime. Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It really is. And I don't know even why we like it, because it's the same thing. It's the same story on and on and on again. And one of the detectives on one of the Dateline episodes that we just watched he said, I have never, ever wanted to be on Dateline because murder is not entertainment. And he said that, and it was like he was talking right to me on my couch. Then I started to feel guilty about the amount of true crime content that I have consumed in my life is a lot.
No, I mean, I'm fascinated with true crime as well. And why is that?
I have no idea, because then it makes me scared, Karen. It makes me think that this is the norm out there, is that all these husbands are out there murdering their wives, and they're not. Like, they are
No, it is not.
absolutely.
It's not. But I would disagree with him. I think true crime, as the way they portray it, is entertainment, because that's why people tune in.
That is true. That's absolutely true.
You know, I
And
don't
I
think
know that I'm not the odd one out here. I know that true
you are
crime, like,
not.
plenty of people are
Well,
into
and
this true crime
to
thing.
me, the science behind how they solve these true crime,
Yeah.
and maybe, just maybe, Michelle, you like it because they do get into the head of these.
Mhm.
So you probably like that mental aspect of, because they get inside the head of these murderers, right?
Yes, they do. And it's really interesting to me just to see. Half the time they don't even say why they did it. But it's so interesting to me to watch the whole thing go down, and to watch the before, and oh, they were such a nice person. Nobody ever thought that everybody loved them. There's always that. But the funny thing is we used to watch medical shows. My husband and I used to watch medical shows, and now he refuses basically to watch medical shows with me, because I'm like, they're putting the stethoscopes in their ears backwards. They can't even hear the heart rate. And I will like stop it in the middle of it. And I said, do you see that there's not even any air in the bag with the mask? There's no oxygen in it. So he's not actually saving anybody.
Right. So yeah, you kind of took the buzzkill out of the show for him, so he won't watch it with you anymore.
For sure. Now he'll look, like we're watching one the other day, and I said his pulse ox is 89 and he's not even on oxygen. Why are they worried about his foot? They should be worried about his oxygen level. It's so
He's
ridiculous.
like, Michelle, where there's enough of this.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Oh my God. This has been a fantastic conversation. So where can people find you? Tell us.
Oh, thank you. I agree, Karen. This has been a fantastic conversation. I was really nervous, but I'm so glad that I did this. Once again, this is me doing it scared, and I'm so glad that I did.
Right. You did it scared, and you stinking knocked it out of the park. I love it. I'm sure people are going to find so much great content in here.
I hope so. I can be found online pretty much everywhere at Pets in Focus Photo. So my website is petsinfocusphoto.com. Facebook and Instagram handles are at Pets in Focus Photo. And you can find me most of the time outside in the freezing cold with my camera in Michigan.
I love it. And who knows, maybe we'll even see a coaching tab on that website of yours.
Maybe you will.
Oh my gosh, this was so good. Well, thanks again, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you, Karen.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Mind Circus. We'd love you to share this episode and inspire someone else to become the ringmaster of their mind circus. So to learn more, go to themindcircus.com. And with the simple click to subscribe, we'll invite you back. And remember, be the ringmaster of your own mind circus.